Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Lee Copus, also known as the Kent Carnivore on his YouTube channel, has a fascinating journey of recovering his health. Lee is a passionate advocate for the carnivore lifestyle, sharing his personal experiences and insights on his popular YouTube channel. After struggling with depression and being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2012, Lee found remarkable relief through the carnivore diet. His story is one of transformation and resilience, as he overcame significant health challenges and now helps others by sharing his journey. In addition to his dedication to the carnivore lifestyle, Lee is also a trained pianist. His musical background adds a unique dimension to his content, showcasing his diverse talents and interests. He now shares his remarkable journey of healing and his insights into the limitations of conventional dietary advice on his popular YouTube channel and through appearances on various podcasts like ours. You can find Lee on his YouTube channel at Kent Carnivore. Lee Copus, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks very much for the invite. It's great to be on.
Absolutely. I think it's so cool, like we mentioned several times in the introduction, that you went through this amazing journey and, found healing, but you're so willing to share your journey, which is very personal. I really enjoyed your podcast on Dr. Kill's, kind of podcast. The episode that you guys did was really wonderful, and that's how I became familiar with your story. And you've really gone through the ringer, man. When did your health issues start to pop up as being an issue in your life?
Yeah, so this was all the way back in 2012. I thought I was great. My health was pretty decent. That was the first indication that my health wasn't optimal in 2012 when I presented with what looked like bloody diarrhea. That's the only way I can really describe it. And it started out really quite minor, wasn't too pressing or anything. But it's still quite a shock, when you see that bright red on the paper. You think, oh, okay, I'm obviously not optimally healthy right now. And so I took myself down to my GP over here in England. And basically, the first thing that the first doctor said that I saw was, if you think it's bowel cancer, you can forget it. So a bit of a strange kind of reaction, really. But part of that made me feel quite confident, because I remember these bowel cancer adverts about awareness and certain symptoms, and then advocating to go down if you have any of the symptoms. I could tick every single one, this whole list on the TV that would come up on the advert. But so yeah, it sort of put my mind a little bit at ease. But you think, well, what's wrong with me, So they referred me to the hospital, and that way we went about having a sigmoid endoscopy. So it's like a probing device where they take biopsies and they run that for tests, and that's when they came back and confirmed, yep, you have ulcerative colitis. So that was, like I say, back in 2012. It's an inflammatory bowel disease. It's also classed as an autoimmune disease, and I knew very little about all of this at the time. So upon revisiting my doctor to talk over this diagnosis, it was a lot of the same information from multiple different professionals. They all pushed fiber. They all mentioned whole grains. And actually, I was kind of on track. I used to naturally base my meals around whole grains. And I just thought, well, I'm kind of halfway there, I've just got to eat little and often. So quite regularly, they said, little and often, small portions, but more frequently throughout the day would be beneficial. So brown rice, whole grain pasta, brown bread accompanied with fruits and vegetables. I only ever really had chicken breast, cod. Very rarely would I have red meat, mostly in the form of a burger, and so of course you've got the bun and more fruits and, tomatoes and things like that, So basically that's what they sent me home with, just this advice. I didn't really need to take any drugs or anything at the time. It wasn't too severe, it was very low end. But after a couple of years, things just got worse, So I would typically go in and out of what we call flare ups. So when you were in remission, I just felt like a normal version of myself, a normal person, no problems. I could go out and go to work and have no worries. But when I flared, it would be once again like bloody diarrhea, but there would be many bowel frequency movements like throughout the day, So sometimes I would go in the beginning, maybe 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 times. But this actually got worse. And so when I would flare up, it would almost immediately be sort of 7 or 8 times. And this number crept up. And so I remember going to the toilet, 10, 12 times a day, thinking like, that's a lot of times to go to the toilet. And every time there was blood, the longer I was in this flare up, the more weight I would lose, the more confidence I would lose. And it wasn't until 2017 when I flared up for the last time. Basically, I'd known going to the toilet maybe up to 20 times on a really, really
Oh my
bad day.
goodness.
But this last flare was just immediately sort of double figures, and it crept up to 30 times a day I was going to the toilet. And at the time I was living with my parents. They only had a toilet upstairs. And I remember these relentless trips to and from the toilet. And I would just try and make myself comfortable on the settee, just laying down. And by the time I got comfortable, pretty much I'm getting signals, you need to go to the toilet. And so I would, drag myself upstairs and go. And it was exhausting. I was just very dehydrated. My muscle was just wasting away very, very quickly. And pretty much I rang up my nan because I wasn't driving at the time. My parents were in LA. And so they didn't know quite what I was going through. And I rang up my nan and said, I don't think I have another day left in me. I'm going 30 times a day. I don't forecast it. It's really, really bad. And so she said, okay, we'll take you first thing in the morning up to the hospital. And that's what we did. I remember that trip up to the hospital. It was so intense, just trying to hold in the output. It was crazy. It was very, very difficult to gain control, and that was sort of stressing me out. I remember grabbing hold of the little handle above the door, sweating, thinking like, oh, it's such a difficult drive. But eventually got there and just presented like an absolute mess. I was very sort of weak and emaciated, dehydrated. They immediately linked me up with both an intravenous drip to hydrate me, just keep on top of that with electrolytes. And then also they were lowering inflammation right there and then with some additional steroids so that they could perform another investigatory just to try and find out, where I am. Because the last time they'd seen me, it was quite low end and quite mild. So I don't think they quite believed me really. But when they started to perform the second sigmoid endoscopy, they were very sort of light in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it sort of turned really serious, and they were bringing in other surgeons and doctors, etc., to come and take a look and offer their opinion. All of a sudden, I was like, it was almost like I wasn't in the room. They were talking very seriously among themselves. And basically, yeah, it was a bad situation. I had colitis, this disease just all the way up the colon. There wasn't any part of my colon that wasn't affected. So that they were basically relaying to me that there's a very good chance I'm not leaving this hospital without at least a large part of my colon going, but they're going to do what they can to try and get me into remission. And they actually went about this by trialing me on a new what is it? It's like a immune suppressant drug, basically. So pretty dangerous stuff, especially when you're in the hospital and you're feeling like weak and kind of not yourself. But that's what they did. And they said it would be maybe a 50-50 that I would be able to get into remissions to buy more time and that sort of thing. But this drug didn't take at all. I mean, I was on it for a few days longer than they wanted me on it, which was quite dangerous in itself. But yeah, the main doctor there that treats, IBD, etc., he came down to me along with about 4 nurses that came into the room, and he was kind of like, sorry, mate, but we're going to have to take you down first thing in the morning, take your whole colon out. And all the nurses were looking at me sort of like, it's going to be okay, and I was sort of thinking at the time, I actually want this done. I feel like I've been poisoned. Everything
Wow.
we've tried isn't working. I was almost welcoming the surgery, like, please, like, yes, this is the answer. Just so tricky, because what they were doing as well was taking me on and off of steroids. And when they did that in the hospital, I would go from going 30 times a day immediately to going maybe 5 times a day, 7 times a day. And then when I came off the steroids, it would jump immediately back up to sort of 25, then it would creep up to 30 again. It was crazy. So there was no sort of saving me or saving my colon. What was happening, and it's kind of a bit grim, but when I was going to the toilet, essentially what was happening is parts of my colon were now coming out, and I was on my way to perforation. And so that the emergency surgery was to
Wow.
prevent that from happening, before it completely bursts, kind of thing. And yeah, they were obviously going to be able to plan a bit better in this situation. So there was no going back, basically. Woke up the next day because it was a long surgery as well. I can't remember what time they performed it, but it was the next day when I woke up. I was just out of it, felt like I'd been through a war. And I just remember the pain coming on, because it's almost like you go for a nap and then they wake you up and it's like, oh, what just happened? Look down and I could see this strange contraption stuck to my abdominal wall. And they just, pushed me into the ICU, and that's where I kind of began my recovery. When I went back to my own room, I started to feel a little bit more like myself, slowly but surely standing up and taking steps. I remember trying to wash my back and things like that because of the big cut down my abs was quite hard work, and just bending down to pick things up. They wanted to see that I was strong enough and independent enough to both look after myself but also change and manage my bag. So if anybody doesn't know, when you have part of your digestive tract taken out, they usually fit a bag to your abdominal wall, and I have what is called a stoma. So if you think stomach, stoma, the stoma is the last part of the intestine that protrudes through my abdominal wall. I had an ileostomy surgery, so I have all of my digestive tract all the way intact down to my ileum. So they took from that terminal part of the ileum to basically my rectum. That was gone. They left a little bit at the back, which was, in most people, I think 80% of people in my situation have, I think it's 10 centimeters or more left, like from the anus upwards. I only had 5 centimeters. I didn't know this until many years later. And so there was very little option for me in the way of reverse surgeries and other things, that people have gone about trying to sort of mitigate this situation that I'm in now with a permanent ostomy bag. Because sure enough, when I got home, and I think this is why people have reverse surgery so often, it really hits you mentally. Your outlook is very much affected by this. When I was in the hospital, I felt fine. I actually felt like I was not poisoned anymore. Like, thanks for getting rid of the poison, all the nurses coming around, they'd seen this so many times. They made me feel very just at home, very normal. But it wasn't until I got home. My parents went to work. My brother went to work. I was alone in my own head. Just my thoughts were very loud. I would look at myself and try to find clothes to cover this up. I felt so alien. It also felt alien to me. And I wasn't really the kind of person that was well suited to this in many ways. I'd often seek comfort. I'm very much a comfort person, which is not a good thing. I have to say it's very difficult because you're always trying to pursue this thing that doesn't really exist. It's like a hedonistic sort of a trait, I guess. But yeah, this bag that I have to wear affected my sleep. And so not only was my outlook already kind of pretty gloomy, but my sleep wasn't great because I felt restricted to my back. And I hadn't figured out foods yet. So when I came home, I just went back immediately to eating all the stuff I still believed was healthy. I didn't even question the fact that, well, I ate these grains and the fruits and the vegetables and I snacked and almonds and all this stuff. That maybe is the reason why I was in the hospital. I never really questioned it. I was so brainwashed that I thought I must get back to eating healthy food again. And this is when I started to see unusual things in the bag. So before, obviously, when I had my colon, I would just get the urge to go to the toilet. You go to the toilet, you flush, that's it. But all of a sudden now, I'm seeing the food in the state that it's in right before it hits the colon. So where my disease was. And what I was seeing was big portions of tomatoes, broccoli, pineapple, almonds, nuts. Sometimes there would be an entire, like, small blueberry or like whole seeds and nuts that I thought I was chewing up in the bread, seeded bread and things like that. There would be meat in there, like chicken and cucumber and avocado and tomato and seeded bread. I'm chewing it all the same, but I never ever found meat in the bag. It was always liquid. But what I did find was all the fibrous plant materials. And so that to me was kind of strange. I was looking at it thinking, like, that can't be right. I didn't really break it down. Like, however I swallowed these plant foods, and fungi is just as bad. So plants obviously contain fiber, cellulose, and lignin structures, very, very kind of robust structures that we can't digest. But fungi contains chitin, and that stuff is just as gas promoting, and it's just as indigestible. It's kind of like their structure, if you like, similar to the shells of insects, So this stuff, like little mushrooms, would be present in my bag, and I was like, this is crazy. Like slices of it on a pizza, it would just be there in the bag. And so crazy to me, but I developed a love-hate relationship with food. It was very tricky because when you eat, it's like you have to eat, right? You get hungry and you who doesn't love food? And so I would look forward to meals, but then right afterwards, I would almost regret it immediately. I would feel a lot of discomfort. I experienced a few obstructions, so basically blockages where the food was struggling to kink round this tight corner and empty into the bag. And again, this only happened with plants. So brown rice caused me problems, mushrooms caused me problems, mango and pineapple caused me problems. And I think that's because I was just chowing down on things like pizza, and those parts are just going down in sizes that wasn't very advantageous given my position. It was causing these blockages, and I've had a couple of bad experiences with that. One in which hospitalized me very, very temporarily, scared me. I woke up in the middle of the night and it looked like my stomach had kind of folded over my bag. It was so blocked that it was kind of, because it's protruding from my abdominal wall, it was kind of pulling on my abs, and they were starting to roll over the bag. It woke me up. It wasn't too painful, but I was like, what on earth is happening, went into the bathroom, turned the light on, and it was like, whoa, it was just crazy. I could almost not see my bag. And so I had to kind of like push my ab, like grab my abs and pull them up. And it was crazy.
Wow.
All because of plants, this was all fibrous materials. So anyway, I go about my life. It was about 5 years that I lived this way before I really figured out that I shouldn't be eating any plants. And so I was lucky to stumble across an anecdote by Michaela Peterson on the Low Carb Down Under channel. And the title of the video was Don't Eat This. And for whatever reason, I just popped it on. And lucky that I did, because I'd reached out previously to my doctor about depression. They passed me on to a unit that we did have one call, and it made me feel pretty good because I thought we had the ball rolling on my depression, because that just happened almost immediately. I got home, I instantly felt depressed. They never got back to me with this second call where they were going to refine perhaps medications, therapy, etc. I was kind of on my own again, and it was 2 months after this call that I discovered this anecdote from Michaela Peterson. And so I just watched it, and it just blew me away on the spot. I felt like I was looking at a female version of myself. It's like she had autoimmunity, she had really bad skin along with that, and she was severely depressed. And she was standing there on stage glowing with health, talking about how she's mitigated all these problems by going on this very strict carnivore diet called a lion diet. And so, first of all, I thought I had heard about this from her father, funnily enough, a few years ago. And I just thought, wow, poor guy can only eat beef. And he never thought that I would be one of those people, that would be that severely kind of sensitive, that maybe that's the best way for me to go as well. And so, yeah, the lion diet felt a bit too sort of extreme coming from my position where I was currently at. So as I'd finished that video, as you know, with the algorithm, I had these other videos pouring in, and that's when I discovered the BBBE challenge and Ken Berry, etc. I thought, well, that makes more sense. There's more variety. I've got my breakfast there. I've got lunch and meals I can make out of that. There's more variety. I'll try that. And so turned to my partner, Lucy, who I'd met actually window cleaning along the way. And she kind of jumped in with me just to support me. So we both just the very next day, just, no more grains, no more pasta and vegetables and fruits. We're just doing this beef, butter, bacon and egg challenge for 30 days. So that's what it was. That's all it was. I never thought to myself, I'm never eating ice cream again. I'm never eating pizza again. What if I can't have chocolate and all this? I was so desperate. I just tried this 30-day challenge. And the very next day, my acid reflux went. It wasn't an issue compared to my depression, but that was really kind of convenient. I was suffered daily with it. That just went instantly. Then I started to notice that my skin was just getting better, and I had some acne on my back. And after a week, it was practically gone. It was crazy. And I was like, wow, this okay. But still very much depressed, and I was struggling with energy just because I'd never eaten fats and I'd always eaten carbohydrates multiple times per day. And so it was kind of like I was waiting and I was waiting. And being the way I was like, oh, I bet this isn't going to happen for me. Anyway, day 21 comes, and all of a sudden I just have all the energy in the world. My outlook is really positive. I remember enjoying everything about the day, like the birds tweeting and the trees just blowing in the wind, and people's company, my customers. I just remembered pulling over and like just recording on my phone. I'm no longer depressed anymore. I feel really, really amazing. And just the way I saw the world, it's like putting a new lens over my eyes. The way I saw the world, what I'd even learned that far. So it was only like 3 weeks in, and I realized I wasn't burning in the sun anymore. I'd already looked into that and found a video on that, and it was just fascinating to me. I did crave, for a few months. They got better as time went on, but after 4 months, I had no cravings. And what I would say is, just slowly but surely, I kind of evolved a little bit the diet, So I knocked dairy on the head. I don't even eat eggs anymore. I would say that I'm on like a modified lion diet with wild fish, and the extra fat I get from things like marrow rather than butter. I just seem to do better without the dairy. Dairy, I kind of get like congestion, and it can lead to more cravings. When I have put butter in, I'm starting to think about chocolate or something, and it's just not ideal. So that's what I did. I started a 30-day challenge, and I've been doing it now 3 years and 2 months. That's basically how good this way of life is. I love life now. I've got a really good outlook. I found that I can actually help other people where I wasn't even able to look after myself when I was depressed. But just by simply changing my diet, I can take care of myself, and now I can actually help others. And I think that that's, for me, like I feel like my life is began, it's really meaningful and I have purpose.
That's so amazing. Wow, what an incredible story. Thank you so much very much for being so honest and vulnerable with that. That's quite a lot and sounds very traumatic as well. Somebody was recently asking me, there one of our last guests, Brad Bates, he's known as the Butcher Wizard on YouTube. He's on his own 30-day carnivore challenge, and he asked me on our episode, like, do you think 30 days is enough to be able to do a challenge? And I told him, like, I don't necessarily think that 30 days is enough, but I also think that 30 days is quite enough for most people to be hooked and to want to continue going. I did the same thing in April of 2019. I wanted to do it for 30 days. And by day 31, I wasn't willing to stop. And to this day, I don't really know many people or any people really that I can name that decided to try a carnivore diet for 30 days and then the very next day say, okay, I'm going back to the way I was eating before. Has that been kind of your experience as well? It was your personal experience, but if, to your knowledge, is that the way most people handle it also?
I would agree with that for the most part. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it depends on you as an individual. Where are you coming from? So I think a lot of people hear about these amazing results that some people have, and they expect to perhaps achieve something meaningful within that 30 days, and sometimes it's just not possible. So I have a theory about why I had such a quick turnaround. I think maybe because I didn't have my gut, I didn't have that extent of a biome, and so I wasn't upsetting the bugs too much by transitioning overnight. And I think that when I did, because I had such little biota down there, because obviously the majority of it is in the colon, I think that maybe that's why I had such a quick turnaround. But I mean, I did struggle with energy definitely for the first 2 weeks. Well, the first 3 weeks, technically, it was right on day 21 where everything seemed to align. But yeah, in my experience, I think most people that start a 30-day challenge, they do experience good results. Most people say something like, my brain fog's gone, I didn't even realize I had it. Stuff like that often happens. Um, I'm losing fat pretty fast, and that's always nice. But I think if you have perhaps other issues, thyroid issues, um, it just depends. Hormone issues, certain autoimmune conditions, they just take longer to reverse. And sometimes even people losing fat, there's certain issues in their body that we just don't know, to the extent where they're at. And sometimes the body needs to heal before you can start to lose fat, because the body doesn't know how fat you are. The body does not understand how many, pounds of fat that you have that for you is too much. It's just like, I don't want to lose fat. I don't want to starve. It holds on to it. So sometimes for some people, they do actually need to eat more than what they think. And maybe, I would say like a 12-week is a pretty safe challenge. It's tricky to, if you have that in your mind, maybe that's why we don't promote those, because it's so difficult to commit to. You think 3 months, that's like quarter of a year. I can't do that for quarter of a year. But 30 days is pretty simple. I think my advice would be to transition really slowly, 6 weeks transitioning. And then when you arrive at BBBE, why don't you just do that for another 6 weeks? That would be my advice. If you have an autoimmune disease, it's best that you don't put cheese in or any dairy in. And a food addiction as well, that kind of thing. Yeah, we're all different, but I do think that it just takes time to find your version, your kind of tailored fitted carnivore or keto style diet. And it's constantly evolving for many people. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that I started eating more raw, that I didn't eat any eggs whatsoever. That's just me. We all find ourselves on a different variation of a carnivore diet.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. I like your thoughts on the, 30-day versus 90-day kind of a carnivore challenge, and everybody can be motivated a little bit differently or demotivated if that challenge does seem like it's going on for too long. People can't imagine doing something for 90 days, excuse me, so 120 days. When do you think was the point, somewhere between 2012 when things were starting to get worse and the day of your surgery? Do you think there, impossible to say for sure, but do you think there would be a point where, had you known this information, you could have saved your colon?
I've actually posed this exact question to a lot of people, people like Bart Kay and Anthony Chafee. If that day when I first went down to my doctors, they said, instead of like eat loads of fiber, eat often, lots of colors, base around whole grains, etc. Imagine if they said, what do you eat? What do you drink? Do you drink alcohol? Right. No more alcohol. Cut that out first for a week. Seed oils, highly processed foods, cut that out. Then, you want to perhaps go from whole grain pasta and brown rice to actually the white bread and the white pasta. and slowly but surely get rid of all the plant materials. I think if they said to me, if you go on a carnivore diet that doesn't have dairy in it, and we're going to get there slowly, I really strongly believe I wouldn't have this problem. I mean, I've spoken to so many people that have Crohn's and colitis, and they reach out to me, like 2 months after watching the video, and they're like, my son's in remission, just want to say thanks. And my Crohn's is gone. I've been in remission for 3 months thanks to you. When I saw your video, I started, to change my diet, etc. So I hear so many times, like countless times, like I have emails, I have messages on my videos, and even other people that make videos, people that have discovered them on their channel, and the answer, like they seem to do extremely well getting themselves out of trouble, getting into remission, and staying in remission for really, really long periods of time. Many of them haven't really gone back and had a flare up since, and they've been doing this for 2, 3, 4 years. So yeah, I strongly believe that if I had the opposite advice, I probably would be here. Well, I wouldn't be here talking to you,
That's
which may be
true.
a shame.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
true.
have any regrets about what's happened, because I'm on a different journey now. I feel like I have more meaning in my life because of this. It's kind of the bad things that happen to us that really builds character.
Yeah, no, that's a great attitude to take, and a very positive way to look at things. Where do you think the disconnect is? Because I've done this so many times. You go onto Google and you search, what kind of diet should I be eating for digestive disorders? And you can punch in any of them, all the ones that you mentioned, the colitis, the IBS, the IBD, all these different things. And the recommended diet is a low to no fiber diet. Yet so few health professionals seem to know that, and most doctors just know that fiber is the best thing for you, especially when it comes to digestive issues. So how did things get so backwards and disconnected there?
Kind of reminds me of what Ken Berry said. He's like, it's the echo of the lie. I think that's so true. Many of our doctors, they have good intentions, dietitians, nutritionists, etc. They really believe that they are qualified to give advice about diet. And you would think, well, why wouldn't they? They have literal qualifications to suggest that they're an expert in this field. But I think that, like, Ken Berry said, the echo of the lie, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, corrupt history, etc., which has kind of laid down the foundation for what we're experiencing right now. Many of the youngsters, young teens are getting diagnosed today with Crohn's and colitis because they have had the wrong information, and it's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. I actually find that when you go on Google, it's so difficult. It's just constant conflicting information as well. So I think most of the studies it's like this bias advocating for fiber and high fiber rich diets, constantly. And people come to me about diverticulosis, celiac, any kind of gut related issues. And they say that through their journey that they've mostly been recommended to consume plant-based stuff and fiber and things like that. But like you say, there certainly is enough information out there. I just think that we're trying to contend with organizations, Sugar Foundation, etc., all of these, big companies they're making so much money, and the drug companies, pharmaceuticals in conjunction with farming. It's crazy. Some of these companies never used to have their hand in farming or food. It used to be one thing, and now all of a sudden it's like it's so tricky. It's just the situation we're in. Unfortunately, they're all working together, and I'm not saying that they're all the bad guys. I think that many people just don't know. They may have good intentions. Maybe they've just got their business hat on and they want to make some money. They're not really considering the deleterious effects downstream to the people consuming their products. But I mean, if you think about Nestle, they got their hand in agriculture and farming and food like Kit Kat bars, but then they have their hand in pharmaceuticals to mitigate type 2 diabetes. What? Immoral hazard, like that's unbelievable. You can't write it. So I think that we're in the minority with our beliefs, and we're trying our best to try and get the truth and what we believe is the truth out there to people. But unfortunately, the mainstream advice is still very much this plant push and the fiber and how beneficial that is, which is crazy because they obviously just don't understand what fiber is, and that the benefits of fiber are not exclusive to fiber. There's far better ways of. It's like going around the houses, or you could just cut straight through. That's the difference to me. It's a tricky situation, but we're all trying to do our part to sort of unravel this mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yours is such a big part of that. Can you go back and explain, with your current understanding, what was happening to your colon in particular, maybe your whole digestive system, but in particular the colon? What caused the severity to for you to have to remove your colon to begin with?
So I never actually had any kind of explanation of this from any professionals. No doctor or surgeon told me what happened. They pretty much put it like this: it's an autoimmune disease. It's in your genes, right? We have drugs when it gets bad. That's basically what they said. They advocated for fiber and these plant kind of meals, but they never told me, even when, after I'd had my colon removed, they never sort of went down that route to explain why, like what happened, how did this start, what was the root cause. And I think it's just based on the fact that they are there to address symptomology until you may need a surgery, and then they just take organs out. But as far as I'm aware, what happened is that somehow, and I can't know which is the culprit, but it's potentially whole grains. It could be nuts. I used to snack a lot on nuts, things that contain lectins. So you got like wheat germ agglutinin is just terrible. Gluten, we know. I don't believe anyone isn't gluten intolerant. I think it's just a spectrum. And so I've obviously consumed foods that contain lectins. Even casein proteins in milk can do this. That's why I'm not a big fan of dairy, certainly for people with autoimmunity. But I think essentially I ate something that poked holes in my intestines. I had this opening of the tight junctions. I've now got intestinal permeability, and that's offset this autoimmune reaction in my body. And my condition, ulcerative colitis, exclusively attacked my colon. So I would have ulcers, and like I say, I would go in and out of remission. These ulcers would bleed and get very vulnerable and aggravated. And then there would be moments where my body's like, oh, okay, I'm all good. I'm all right for a bit. And then I would go in and out of these flares. But because I wasn't fixing the problem at root cause level, because I was continuing to eat fibrous foods as well, even in itself, if you have leaky gut, fibrous foods aren't going to help you close that gut and seal that gut. Continuing to consume plant proteins and lectins aren't going to help, and the dairy, and I'm guilty of all of it. I even had some alcohol here and there. I wasn't ever chronic, but all of these things are really, really bad and cause inflammation to our gut anyway. And I think that where I wasn't addressing root cause on my journey, I was just taking the medications and taking the doctor's dietary advice, which was contraindicated in my opinion. I think it was contrary to the right information. It was the opposite, that I was just continuing to aggravate and aggravate, and the disease would just slowly but surely spread further up, and to the point where they couldn't even sort of like hold on to a part of it. Every part of the colon had to go. And so I think I just opened up my gut, continued to eat the wrong foods. The disease spread to the point where there was no return. I had to have a life-changing kind of surgery, just so I wasn't going to die. Basically, there was no other way around it at that point. So
Yeah. The medications are interesting. I'm certainly not an expert in medications that deal with this kind of thing, but I can't even imagine what kind of benefit medications would have. I don't know how that would even help with what you're describing compared to what you're actually putting in as far as like food. There can't be hardly any benefit from medications. From again, I'm not an expert. From what I can imagine, that would be hard to believe.
yeah, the only benefit was when you first start to take it, you get a benefit, and that's all medicine. If you first go plant-based when you take, you're on a processed food diet, you're going to get some benefits. It's like that, the NRF2 pathway, antioxidant pathway, etc. It's like, that same pathway can be expressed by eating lead and mercury, but you wouldn't take medication for the rest of your life. Like, who wants to take chemotherapy if you don't have cancer? Right? No one would do that. It's nuts. And so I do believe, I was just putting in the wrong materials, and basically I wasn't addressing root cause. So the medication would lower the frequency of bowel movements. I don't understand the mechanisms behind that. I haven't even looked into that actually, but at first that was the benefit. It was like, oh wow, this is really convenient. Like, I just feel a bit better not going to the toilet as much. It would kind of cut it 50% perhaps. But a year goes by and I'm right back to where I was. And then another year goes by and I'm worse. And now I'm back to the doctor saying, I'm even worse than before. Obviously, then they try and tweak the medication different, or the dosage. And that obviously isn't the answer. That's, my outlook now has changed so much, but I just can't get my head around how they don't know that they're not helping people with drugs. Drugs are like ignoring root cause, and they must see that the patients that come in with health problems, that they then put them on a dosage of drugs and give them a prescription that like many years go by, why are they still visiting you? Why have you not put the two and two together? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm nothing against them. I'm sure they mean well, but also the patient. And I've been there. I didn't even think. I thought he's the expert. These guys know what they're talking about. I'm going to listen to them because I'm pretty scared about my health. And who am I? I'm a window cleaner. These guys know, right? And so I just put my trust in them. Anyone that's wearing the white coat, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and you get on and do it. And I never really questioned. I didn't have a lot of autonomy where these days, I have this filter, it's kind of like, well, let me just check to see if that's even accurate. Or let me just check, is that right? That doesn't sound right. The ancestral filter really helps a lot of the time to sort of sieve out the BS, If it's not possible that you can't do it kind of 20,000 years ago, should we be doing it now? Or, this thing that apparently if you take every day, it'll have 5 years to your life. It's like, but we only just figured it out like 10 years ago. How is that a good thing? I don't know. It's all that kind of stuff.
Well explained, and a perfect segue to my next question. I was going to ask you about our evolution. We can go through the entire body and say, like, why do we have the brain size that we have? Why do we have two eyes that face forward? Why do our shoulders have the ability to throw things way better than some of our primate ancestors? But let's just focus on the digestive system and the things you've learned since going carnivore and learning more about the digestive system. What evidence do we have that humans are carnivores, are made to digest meat much better than plant materials?
Yeah, I think I'll go from probably the weakest points. I think maybe the weakest points are we have eyes facing forward. There are exceptions to that with the animal kingdom, etc., where there's herbivores that have eyes facing forward and carnivores that have eyes slightly on the side. Same with teeth, dentition. That's not necessarily like the be all end all in terms of that makes us carnivores. I think more compellingly, I like the fact that, well, we have carnivore stomachs. If you look at animals and their stomach and the fluid, how acidic it is, we're right there up, with lions, dogs, and vultures. We're on that side. We're not over here with the cows and the rhinoceros and the rabbits. It's like our stomach is super acidic, and that is made so that we can kill potential harmful pathogens on meat. We used to be scavengers, and also to break down and liberate all those amino acids and the proteins to amino acids and tripeptides so that we could absorb it in the small intestine. Same goes for fatty acids and things like that. But I think another one is the appendix. I mean, that says so much to me. I mean, why would we have an appendix if we're now supposed to eat a plant-based diet? Why would that vestigial part of the cecum be in the state that it's in? It's atrophied so much. That to me shows a trend. It shows this trend of we're not eating as much plant food. We're not eating as much plant foods. We're eating more fatty meat. And then, of course, the combination of the brain size and the colon size. So our colons are sort of half the size relative to other primates who eat leaves all day and eat their own feces to get B12 and things like that, So, I mean, there's that, and the size of our brains and what it's composed of, saturated fats and cholesterol, and also 20% of the lipids are DHA, which comes from things like fish, and you get decent amounts in lamb and some in beef and eggs and things like that. But to me, if you look at the whole picture, eyes facing forward, canine teeth, carnivore stomachs, small colons, massive brains, and like you said, the ability to throw projectiles to kill targets. And we've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years, evidence of it all over the globe. That was, the fat of the land and the animal. That's what we prized as a food source. It contained everything we needed, and it allowed our brains to develop in such a way. And because they're so expensive, I think perhaps that's why we lost part of our colon, where we don't ferment the fiber like a hindgut digester, and we don't have large cecums or four-chamber stomachs to actually make use of this fibrous material. Now, when we do, as we partially ferment this in the colon, well, what do? We get short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. And people in the plant-based community, we even know this, but they can't put together first of all, we get short-chain fatty acids from proteins, animal proteins, if that is so important, isobutyrate, isovalerate, isopropionate. But, furthermore, we actually convert or transmute these short-chain fatty acids into ketone bodies like beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is flooding our blood and feeding all of the cells, all of the colonocytes, the cells that line the colon, and not just the ones that conveniently come in contact with this indigestible portion of the plant, the carbohydrate portion of the plant that we can't break down. It's not a nutrient. It doesn't enter the bloodstream. It causes a lot of gas. It's, even methane, and it exacerbates constipation often. And we see, I'm not a big fan of studies, because a lot of them really mean almost nothing, you know. But if you look at the best study done on fiber and idiopathic constipation, you have these people on a high fiber, medium fiber, low fiber, and zero fiber diet. And in the zero section, that cohort, it's like all of the symptoms gone. Not one, no straining, constipation, bleeding, you know, no problems whatsoever, all gone. So to me, that's hugely compelling. And when I've cut out fiber as well, I don't get the gas in the bag like I do when I eat plants. It's very telling.
Fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, to have that direct evidence with what's going on in your body, I think is absolutely fascinating for sure. And it's so interesting. Recently, I was kind of learning about panda bears, for example, and they are bears just like other bears. They're actually carnivorous, but for whatever reason, something switched in them a few million years ago, where they have to subsist largely on, I believe it's eucalyptus plants, and they have to chew these leaves and the stalks and all these
But
things. Is how they
pandas or
get their
koalas? Sorry, which ones are you talking about?
uh, I thought it was a panda bear, and maybe wasn't eucalyptus, but or
Yeah, I
or,
think the
or am I
koalas
getting
eat
that wrong?
eucalyptus. Yeah, yeah. Koalas eat eucalyptus, pandas eat
Okay,
bamboo. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
bamboo. No, it's bamboo. You're right. It's a panda
Bamboo,
bear
right.
with bamboo. Maybe the same thing happens with koala bears. I'm not aware, but I know for sure with panda bears, they have to they have to subsist on this one plant, and they have to eat all day long, and they have terrible gut issues. Every few days they'll like go and like lay in the side because they have issues like IBS and IBD, the things that we suffer from, and the amount of matter that they have to pass through is like pounds and pounds and pounds every single day. It's quite interesting.
Right, right. I've not actually looked into that. I know
It's
that
fascinating.
some of these animals have adapted to eat certain plants that are so toxic that other animals just leave them alone.
Yeah,
Like, I think that
yeah.
is koala bears, isn't it? Like the
It's
eucalyptus.
along yeah, it's along those lines that even after, whatever switched for them millions of years ago, where they are at least able to, maybe there was a shortage of the food they were eating before and they adapted to eat this, but even then they're still dealing with issues, and it's been millions of years. To think that we would be able to adapt to high fiber foods so
Yeah.
quickly is kind of funny if you think about it. um and we hear all the time that we evolved eating fibrous foods, we adapted to eating fibrous foods, like I said. I'm thinking around my neighborhood. It's September here in the Salt Lake Valley. It's been a pretty good growing season. Lots of things have grown around me. Maybe it's my lack of ancestral wisdom, but I just don't see like tuberous plants growing everywhere that would be edible, even if I knew how to find them, to cook them, to prepare them in some way. We also, in my neighborhood, we have gardens. People will rent a garden plot. You see a lot of them all together. I see how much work they do. I used to do gardens, and I know how much work I would put into an entire summer. And now this is the time of year that everything is ripe, everything is growing. You think about all the man hours that went towards cultivating a few plants like tomatoes, maybe some pumpkins. I've seen some corn plants, and you look at these combination of gardens, and I just look and see like how many calories went into the work to cultivate all of these plants, and how long could I subsist on just eating these. And to think like once I've eaten a tomato, that tomato plant is not going to continually give more tomatoes. That might be food for like a day or two for me before I would be completely out of calories and I would be starving looking for more food. And just to think like calorically, if nothing else, the trade-off between how much work you would have to do to cultivate some plants, what you would get out of them, it's not even close. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think edible plant foods are seriously scarce. Obviously, we've gone about coming up with these different farming practices so that we can make these foods available. But yeah, like you say, I mean, how long are you going to be able to last until your B12 runs out? And like you better find some kind of animal, fish, game, most likely, just so you don't die. That you need to find some every so often at least, even if you are going to eat mostly plants. But of those plants, I mean, what are you actually getting out of it? um, non-native plants as well that we've forced to grow out of dirt because it's not even soil anymore. It's crazy what's happening. The situation what we're in, but the landscape changes all the time. So I mean, throughout history, all these different animals have gone extinct for all sorts of reasons. And if you think that we most likely hunted a lot of the our food sources to extinction, I don't know 100%, but most likely we hunted a lot of those megafauna to extinction, and we had to figure out what we're going to do. And because we are so intelligent, so creative, we obviously figured out how to, I suppose, during certain times, we can grow grains and store grains, and that got us out of trouble. But that doesn't mean that we should be eating whole grains with every meal every day. Far from it. They're some of the worst things to consume, in my opinion. The whole grains,
Yeah,
just
I
like
agree.
seed oils.
Yeah, I agree. No, yeah, there's compelling evidence that any continent that humans ever went to, we overhunted the megafauna, like you said, that we don't see anymore. And to say that those are the animals that would be the slowest, probably easiest to catch, easiest to hunt, and the highest fat content really tells you a lot about how we evolved and the foods that we would have preferred, especially in the gut when you're talking about that butyrate. Like you said, like you can kind of have workarounds to have your body make butyrate, or you can just have ketones and make the butyrate
Right.
that you need. And you're cutting right to the chase.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Shame I don't like butter, or I can't do that great on butter because that's really high in butyrate as well.
Yeah, yeah, more for me. That's okay. I understand. So what does your diet look like today? How do you construct your carnivore diet? How many times a day are you eating? That sort of thing.
So I did try sort of 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day. In the beginning, I was kind of eating 3 meals, 2 meals on and off. But these days, I seem to do really well on either 1 meal or 2 meals. I just listen to my body. So sometimes I get up and I'm like, I'm great. And that's most of the time. Sometimes I'll come home and have a light lunch so I can carry on and be busy. And then I'll have a blowout meal. As long as I'm done before 6 p.m., that usually serves me really well. If I eat after 6 p.m., I feel like I wake up in the night to go wee and stuff like that. All that protein. Um, but yeah, basically, my diet is kind of a modified lion diet. So I love beef. I do prefer beef to lamb, but I do also eat a lot of ground lamb and cutlets and things like that. But I do try to eat a nose to tail, nose to tail. I don't eat the nose. I've had the tail though, I've had the tongue. I have some organs. I'm not a fan of liver really, but I do have some every now and again, just a small little bit, like a vitamin pill. But my favourites, ribeye, chuck, sirloin, brisket. I do really enjoy tongue and tail, actually. Oxtail is beautiful, oxtail soup. I wish I could get hold of some blood, to be super ancestrally consistent with everything. That's one big puzzle piece that we're all missing, in my opinion. What else? I have wild mackerel and I'll have wild salmon. Also, occasionally prawns and things like that, scallops, but it's all wild. So I try to only eat animals that eat what they're supposed to eat. I don't go for I understand that if that's all you can afford, that's great. But I just preference kind of pastured for life beef and lamb. And I develop a really nice rapport with my butchers. They actually kind of help me out. They'll give me good deals. I'll get kilos of brisket ground up for £10 a kilo, which is really quite reasonable.
That's good.
Yeah, other bits and pieces. Sometimes if they throw like heart and things and grind it all up, obviously the price comes down again, and you can get stuff like £7 a kilo. So that's close to $10, I guess, $10 a kilo for some high quality fatty red meat with some extra nutrition in there. So I do believe in having the ground meat as well, because that's often the cuts that you're not eating if you're buying what's just in the counter. Often if people have just ribeye eggs, I think that's fantastic and you're going to do really well for a long period of time. But I do think that if you can include some more variation from that animal, not only is it kind of a better strategy, you're going to get different nutrients because they all have different spectrums of nutrients. I think it's just more ancestrally consistent. And I think it's kind of, if, as long as you can afford to do so, it's quite respectful, really. We wouldn't just kill a ruminant animal and just eat ribeyes and then have some eggs with it and then just guard the rest. So I try and make use of the majority of a ruminant animal, if you like, what's doable and what's possible. So yeah, today it's been so long since I've had an actual steak. I've had a lot of ground meat and stuff like that and wild fish, but I've got a tomahawk sitting there. It's been out of the fridge for about 4 hours with a bit of Celtic salt on one side. Once we're done, I'll stick it on the barbecue and have it nice and rare. So I usually eat rare. Um, Often as well, if it's like a cooking method that's really high heat, I won't leave it on for very long. I'll cut the fat off and then just cook the rest through a little bit. So some of those connective tissues are a bit more tender, but I don't render the fat down. I don't really do well on liquid hot rendered fat. Even if it's intact on a steak, if it's kind of like just juicy, I understand it looks and sounds and tastes delicious, but after a while, I would say 2, 3 hours later, I'm kind of like, don't feel optimal. And it took me a while to figure it out. Sorry. It took me a while to figure out that basically I'm best off on more raw fat. And so what I would say is that I kind of cook my steaks rare, but by fat. Rather than looking at the muscle meat, I cook it rare by the fat. So I imagine, is it kind of 50% raw in the middle, right, take that off, or at least cut the fat off, and then if it's a bit tough, the rest of the meat, I might put it on for another minute and a half each side or something. Not on the barbecue, that's even too long for me. It's so hot that I find it tenderizes it quite a lot. And I have a bag. I have these problems. I've had problems with obstructions before. I've yet to have any problems with meat. I've swallowed chunks of meat and it makes it through into liquid form. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. The tomahawk sounds amazing. I'll be right over for that. That sounds really good.
Yeah, 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, just right around the corner you are. Okay, so we mentioned in the introduction, carnivore as a lifestyle, and you mentioned that you have now a filter where you can take concepts and kind of think about things and question things. And I'm just curious, what are the things you have discovered since going on this carnivore journey that help contribute to the overall carnivore lifestyle? Other lifestyle practices that you incorporate that you find
Yeah,
contribute to your
yeah.
health?
So I guess basically with having like an ancestral lens, I think about everything from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. So if you think like in a wild setting, alarm clocks aren't waking us up. And also, we don't have to turn on a light and walk in a bathroom or whatever. If we're out in the wild, it's the birds coming alive and the bees all going to work and the sun and the sound of a new day and that circadian biology waking us up. And so what I try and do as much as possible is stick to a rhythm that's consistent or as consistent as can be in modernity, living inside a brick house with electric and heating and all this stuff, Wi-Fi. I try and minimize the usage of screens and blue light exposure as much as possible. And the first thing I do in the morning, I see sunrise every day. Basically, I wake up and I walk straight outside, take my shoes and socks off, or if, whatever, I don't even have shoes and socks on. I just go straight outside and walk straight onto the grass. In the process, what I also do is structure water. So I'll take some water in glass bottles that's either distilled or you can get Voss water or something that's really clean. I put a very generous pinch of Celtic sea salt in there. I'll take the water out with me. And as I'm grounding and just breathing and experiencing the sunrise, I structure water in that light as well. And often I'll mineralize it overnight. So it kind of, even if it's getting cool enough, I'll put the water outside. It then is mineralizing overnight, goes dark, and then the sun's coming up. It's kind of just giving the water some local information because it never used to be coming out of a tap with all the plastics and the grit and the estrogens and God knows what's in the water now, where it's dark and it's staying still for long periods of time. It's very dirty. So I try and think about the water I'm drinking. I think that we used to walk around bare feet a lot, so I'm grounding, which is a way of receiving antioxidants. The gaining of electrons is antioxidants. And also sunrise is the best way to set your circadian biology and the best way to ensure that you're going to get good sleep that day, later that day. What else do I do? Breathe through my nose. I didn't actually used to breathe through my nose as much as I do these days, but that makes a massive difference. You're oxygenating your body and filtering the air in the room that you're in and things like that. Another thing I do is if I'm in the vehicle, because I clean windows, even if I'm cold, I try and keep the windows down so that the natural light's coming in. I try and embrace the cold as well. I think we're all adapted to the inside and the heat. And when we get a little bit cold, we put a cardigan on and we put the heating on. Where I try and embrace the cold now, and I think that's really, really good for your mitochondria. It's very ancestrally consistent. We're adapted to out there being cold. It's very cold a lot of the time. Even during the summer, it gets cold, at night and during the night. I think people don't realize, cold exposure is good. I don't do so much sort of cold dipping or anything. I suppose like if I wash, I'll just let it dry on my body and things like that. All that kind of stuff's really great. And I suppose just stay away from anything that's so-called progress. A lot of this progress is so inflammatory and toxic. If you think the plastic bottles and the Wi-Fi and the 5G, if you can turn it off, leave it out the bedroom. That's one of the things that I would definitely suggest. Just leave your technology out of the bedroom. Make sure it's as dark as possible when you're sleeping and then wake up. And I know it sounds crazy, but the sunrise thing, it can be hard at first. But when you start doing it every day, if you don't do it, you just regret not, experiencing the sunrise. It's so beneficial. I get naturally euphoric just after about 15, 20 minutes of being outside. It's like a little high, a free high that you get, like a dopamine thing. It's amazing. And I just love nature. I've really come to love nature even more than I do. I love the rain. I love the birds. I love the weather. I love grass and forests and animals and everything. I just love nature and try and embrace that as much as possible.
Yeah. If you're watching or listening to this and you have no idea what Lee is talking about, he's talking about the carnivore calm that all of us kind of know and have come to love, and what you experience kind of 3 weeks into your journey, and noticing birds and trees and just little simple things that pass us by every single day that make life so enjoyable. I just, you've heard that story over and over and over again, where people embrace this type of lifestyle and have that experience 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, where everything just is amplified as far as what you have gratitude for, what you
Yeah.
appreciate, what you feel connected to in your spirituality, however you want to define it. It's just, it's a different level that you can get to. It's carnivore calm. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And the opposite is also so loud. Like when you walk into a supermarket, it's like, oh my goodness, and there's nothing in here that's any good. You know, like all of the products. I mean, in terms of, so I get all of my stuff from butchers. My partner Lucy will go and do the other parts of the shopping. So we'll grab some kitchen roll and toilet paper and certain things. But it's quite minimalist. She's not getting tinfoil and hair dyes and body wash and underarm spray and toothpaste, and we don't use any of that stuff. You know, it's not consistent with our genetics to be putting these toxic chemicals on our skin. If you won't eat it, don't rub it on your skin. Don't spray it on your hair. And I mean, this is just salt and water. You know, my hair. If the wind picks up, it might not be the same. But you know, like why do I need to spray hairspray into my scalp? And it's kind of scary, especially when I see young children, what they eat, the products they use. You know, they walk past me and it's like, I don't know about you, but smells and everything, it's so potent to me now.
Oh yeah.
Like garlic, hairspray, deodorants, toothpaste. I can tell when someone's just brushed their teeth from like a mile away. It's like, oh my God, what is that smell? It's really unusual. But yeah, it's funny. You become so clean in terms of what I eat, so minimalist. It's like the most nutrient dense, least inflammatory, least toxic, pure local food. And then I just drink water that's structured, and that's it. So all these other chemicals, they really make themselves known how kind of profound they really are and in everyone's lives, most people's lives. They're full of them. You know, they have so many different products that they add to their weekly shop, and it's like 99.9% of that is not only unnecessary, but it's inappropriate, you know.
Yeah, totally. I know, a mile away. You mentioned like I can walk a mile away from the splash pad that's near my house. You smell the sunscreen. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so
Right.
strong. Like, yeah, I cringe to think about the cologne I used to wear. That would, it would crush me now. There's no way I could do that. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Man, Lee, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think your experience is incredible, to be able to actually physically see what is going on with your digestive system. It's completely unfortunate what happened to you, and of course, on the one hand, it's like I wish you had never had to go on that journey, but on the other hand, it's like you said, you would never be here had you not, and had you not had the attitude of wanting to take this journey and share it with other people. I think is just wonderful, and I've really, really appreciated our time and your time on this show today to share everything that you're doing. It's been wonderful, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
So I am exclusively on YouTube. So at Kent Carnivore, that's where you'll find me. I am currently working on a service. So basically, it's called Let Lee Explain. I find in terms of the social aspect, lots of people are really alone on their journey. And for me, it wasn't really a problem, but I hear for a lot of other people, it can be one of the biggest issues. They just don't have the support that they need. They're often ostracized and isolated by even their own family and friends. They're really excited to tell their family members, you know, the results that they've had, but even their own mum sometimes can't smile along with them as they express themselves. You know, the excitement that they have, that they've mitigated so many problems. And so often the people in your life aren't the best people. You know, it's difficult sometimes if it's family or friends. They're often not the best person to explain. And I think if you are doing carnivore, there's a massive chance that someone in your life thinks you've lost the plot, you know. And so the idea around this is that we would book a call, you know, on behalf of this person, and then I would calmly explain and hopefully, you know, put their mind at rest, because I think it's just all about concern. A lot of the time, it's all coming from a place of fear and not understanding. And so, yeah, you'll find all of this linked to my channel on YouTube. But I'm just doing what I can, basically.
That's wonderful. I think that's a wonderful service that you offer. I think that would be very validating for a lot of people out there who, yeah, legitimately do have concerns because of the message that they're getting from all angles. So, Lee, thank you again so very much for taking the time to come on our show today. And thank you for being so generous with the advice and information that you offer. It really makes a difference out there. And we're really grateful for you. So, thank you so much for being on our show today. We really appreciate you.
You bet, man. Much love, Casey. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.